Hello, everyone. I'm Matthew Freedman, Matt F. the Oracle. Welcome to the BettingPros podcast, brought to you by BetMGM, where you can get a risk-free bet of up to $1,000 when you use the highly original promo code BettingPros with your first deposit. Here with me to talk NFL Week 13 market movement and power ratings, as well as some Thursday Night Football, is Jim Sonis at Number Fire. Jim, we're almost to December. It's kind of hard to believe that the season is progressed this far, but that's the case. And how's it going for you?
It's going okay. I like my numbers are testing pretty well. The selection process has been, I would say, probably flawed. Like, I don't know. It's been an odd year, I guess is what I would say. Like, I feel like the process has been good. The results have not been as good. So I don't know, honestly. Like, you're asking how it's gone. My answer is I frankly don't know. I wish I could be more definitive. I don't know.
Well, okay, this is interesting. The numbers have been good, but the selection process has seemingly been flawed.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about what goes into your selection process? Because I know some people, like, they'll have the model, they're pretty dogmatic with the model. If the model shows value, they bet it. If there's no value based on the model, they don't bet it. But it seems like you're using the model more as like a filtering system or like a starting point. Can you talk about the process a little bit?
It's literally that. I use it as a starting point. So what I do is I will look at every game that meets a certain threshold for a spread perspective, and then, consider key numbers and stuff like that. And then also look at every game that checks a box from a money line perspective and decide, okay, I'm going to write down these. And then what I do is I have a spreadsheet, then I check, do I agree? Yes or no? And I'll go through each game and like, okay, do I think my numbers are undervaluing something? Because like there are a lot of situations where like I think a certain team may be overvalued by my numbers. So when they show value on that team, I might not agree enough to actually bet that spread. So I'll put down either a 1 if I agree, 0 if I don't, and then if I agree, I'll bet it. If I don't, I won't bet it. And that can change throughout the week. Stuff changes. Like the Titans Packers Thursday night game. Initially, it was one I didn't agree with because I thought Jeffrey Simmons was going to 6. He sat the previous game. Then when he was ruled in Thursday morning, it's like, okay, I actually agree with this now, and then that can change. But so I write down whether I agree or not, and then I'll bet it if I actually do agree. So it's a process of, do I show value? Do I agree? And if I can check yes on both those flowcharts, I'll bet it. So I can actually look back and see how often have I disagreed with a game with my numbers, and it's actually been a winning bet. It's been pretty often this year, so maybe I should be more liberal about it and just be like, yeah, if it shows value, I'll take it. I've not done that yet. I am checking yes for more boxes recently, saying, okay, I agree with this more often. But it was an error earlier on this year where I don't think I was putting enough faith in where it was showing value.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I'm going to have a question on money line versus spread in a little bit, but first I want to dig just a little bit more into the process here of kind of using your lines or your early projections as a filtering system.
Yeah.
Why is it that you have sort of that second step? So I'll just kind of say I'll frame this a little bit more. This is the first year where I've gone the distance of having power ratings, having a model, taking home field advantage here versus there into account, and trying to quantify all of these things that previously it was just sort of like, okay, well, there are enough sort of like checked boxes on this side of the ledger, so I like this bet. And so forcing myself to go through that process has made me much more kind of reliant on the numbers, or like desirous to bet on the numbers. And there have been some times this year where I've had certain projections and I thought, okay, I know this is my projection, but I don't really trust it. And most of the time, like you, I've sort of like checked a box to sort of see like, okay, I need to circle back to this later and see if there are a certain number of times when I'm going away from my projections. Is this something where I'm making a suboptimal decision? And I found that most of the times, at least this year, when I've gone against my numbers or haven't made a bet because I didn't feel strongly enough about it, that would have won. And so, can you talk a little bit more about why it is that you kind of have this double process and maybe don't trust the numbers as much?
So a lot of it's due to back testing. I know the areas where my model back tests the worst. And typically that's on like bigger spreads. So like it has sometimes can have trouble capturing how bad some teams are. So like this week, as an example, the one money line where I'm showing value that I don't agree with is the Rams against Seattle. And that's because I feel like it's very possible my numbers can encapsulate how bad this current Rams team is. So
Yeah.
I'm hesitant to bet that because I think that my numbers may be undervaluing it because it might not fully capture in how bad they are effectively. Like I have a downward adjustment in for Bryce Perkins or John Wolf or whoever it may be. I've got a downward adjustment in for, I'm assuming, no Aaron Donald at this point. So I put that as I don't agree because I think that my model won't encapsulate how bad they are. But then I look at, movement and like there's already been some money coming in on the Rams. They were 3-1 on the money line this morning. They're now plus 285. So clearly someone else is showing value on the Rams and actually taking it. I'm not. And I don't think I can, like, especially once it's moved, it's like, okay, well, now it's no longer as good of a value, and I'm still kind of hesitant. I don't want to buy in just because the market is saying that the Rams are the right side here.
Yeah.
So it really is like trying to figure out where my model is weakest. And I think that I thought I had a good grasp on that. Like I have all the numbers so I can check, okay, typically if I've got them as a 5-point favorite and they are a 3.5-point favorite, how often do they cover? I can like look back at that and decide, okay, is this actually worth value and stuff like that? I thought that I had a good grasp on that. And I think that the performance this year of the ones I disagree with is saying maybe I don't have as firm of a grasp on that as I thought I did.
It's interesting. At least you're on I would say, like, if you are airing, like if back testing, seeing where you're weaker, at
Yeah.
least it's on an underdog, which like historically would be the sharper side.
Right.
For me, I think it's flipped a little bit where, like, I've noticed that I'm probably too high on the Chiefs, or like too high on teams that are, I would say, significantly better,
Yeah.
and probably could cover a number if they really needed to, but they don't need to. They just need to win the game. And so, like there's a difference between, sort of like projecting EPA and success rate in yards per play into a spread, and a team a team having the capability of covering the spread versus the team feeling the urgency to cover the spread. So I feel like that is one area where I need to make some adjustments in the future, and some kind of like manual adjustments now that I've probably been a little bit too high on some teams based on circumstances.
Yeah, I think for me, I never really have that problem because it's so rare. So I have my numbers up here of the like 130 games where I've seen money line value this year. It just sounds like a lot, and it is a lot. It's like 10. That's a lot. It's so there have been a lot of games that have shown value
Yeah.
this year. 100 of them have been underdogs. So
Mhm.
it's pretty rare for me to
Yeah.
show value in a favorite. And this past weekend is a bit different. I did show value on the Rams, showed value on Miami and Dallas, the Jets, Denver, woof. But last week is a little bit different, but for the most part, it is showing value on underdogs. I don't typically have to worry about that too much. I'm not laying a lot of big numbers for the most part. If there are big numbers, I do tend to go towards the money line versus the spread.
Mhm.
That's just kind of like a personal preference kind of thing. So I actually haven't had that problem. For me, it's more so showing like value on big underdogs. Like there were times the Texans last year were like 10.5-point dogs, and it's like showing value. And I'm like, I don't want to do this. So that was why I had the extra layer of like, okay, do I agree with this? And it hasn't gone great so far. So maybe I'm just scarred
Yeah.
by the Texans, I think.
Well, at least it's been a little bit of the year of the underdog for
Yeah.
you. So that's, I mean, imagine if a whole bunch of favorites were hitting and you
Yeah.
were still on underdogs, and kind of like quote unquote like picking the wrong games out
Right.
of the
Right.
system. So at least in the big picture sense, the macro sense, things are kind of going more your direction. You mentioned there, the spread versus the money line. And I wanted to ask you about that. So I, dug into some numbers, historical numbers, and it's made the most sense, at least in terms of like one loss, like profit, units won. If you like an underdog and the dog is less than 7, so 6.5 to 0, or 6.5 to 0.5. It historically has been more profitable to bet the money line versus the spread. And I think that makes intuitive sense. But of course, sometimes it's, I don't want to say it's more fun to bet the spread, but like for contests, you talk about the spread. People just
Yeah.
generally talk about the spread versus the money line. And so there's always, I think, this kind of like, not double talk, but this like translation that happens where you're talking about a team, you say, okay, I like them at +3, but when you bet them, you're betting them more on the money line, or maybe you're splitting it, some on the money line, some on the spread. But can you talk a little bit more about how you view the money line versus the spread?
Yeah, I just want the better value. And so like I have like a money line model. And so I'll run it through the money line model and I can see what kind of edge that I've got in that model. The win odds based on my model versus the implied win odds at the sports book. And if I've got like a decent edge on the money line, I will take the money line. Wind up taking the money line more often than not because the amount of edge I'm going to get on a spread, like my models may say that their odds of covering are 58%, and 52% or whatever is like break even, assuming minus 110. So you're only going to get a couple percentage points every now and then. I can get a lot bigger than that for a money line. Like this one didn't work out. This thought process didn't work out. But last week, the Lions Bills game was a good example where I was showing value in 9.5, but there was a much larger edge to go at the money line. So I didn't bet the spread at all. I went full money line. Obviously, that lost. So I should have gone spread there. I would have won my bet had I gone with the spread. But I had a much bigger edge in terms of my numbers versus what the market was saying by going at the money line. If the margin is thinner and I can feel good about it, I will go towards the spread. I'm not always betting money lines with underdogs, but a lot of times it does wind up being the money line, like the Dolphins in week number 13, whatever week this is. I can't remember anymore. Week 13. I was going to take the 3.5 because it means that I get a full win on 3 as opposed to a push. If it were on 3,
Yeah.
it wasn't on, it's a 4 at most places right now. But, that's a pretty forgiving number to get a push on 4, to get a win on 3. That's a forgiving number. But the edge was bigger with the money line than it was with the spread. So I wound up taking the money line. So for me, it really does come down to putting faith in my numbers, putting faith in where the bigger edge is based on those, and taking that route. And yeah, it's going to be more volatile to bet money lines when
Yeah.
I tend to bet more underdogs, but I'm okay with that. Volatility is okay if it comes with upside, and this does come with upside. So I'm okay with that volatility personally because I just want the better edge personally.
Yeah, you mentioned the volatility there, and that's right where my mind was going. Where it's, I think you ultimately, at least historically, have made more money if you're betting the money line, but there are more peaks and valleys.
Yeah.
So you just have to be like the psychological state of being a better. Like some people don't handle losing well.
Yeah.
Like it maybe puts them on tilt a little bit, and so you just have to be mentally comfortable knowing that you're going to be losing more bets than you win.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of like quote unquote trust the process. And I think it's a little bit harder when you're in the middle of losing to trust the process there. But yeah, I mean, money line betting versus spread, I do think it's different. It takes like I think a different kind of mindset and mentality for it.
Yeah, it is tough. I think that betting baseball kind of ground me into like, okay, I'm going to lose a lot of bets. Like you just kind of accept the fact that like, yeah, I'm going to lose a lot of bets. But and like also, I bet a lot in NASCAR. You lose a lot in NASCAR, and you have stretches where you lose a lot, especially if you like the best market in terms of like edge you're going to get tends to be outrights. So it's volatile. You're going to go on streaks where things don't go very well. It can kind of suck. But like, I think that does translate to NFL for me where I'm like, okay, Lions didn't win plus 330. That's okay. They gave me a good sweat. They played well. I didn't get CLV, but I felt like it was a good bet regardless. So I think that betting other sports and accepting the fact that I'm going to lose decently often, that has made me pretty comfortable with playing that way.
Mm-hmm. So one more question here about your model. So you mentioned having the money line model, and I'm assuming you maybe at that point you have the money line model and then you convert it into a spread. Whereas I think a lot of people have a spread model and then convert it into a money line. I just kind of want to like circle back. Is that what you do?
So it's the reverse. It gives me a point differential for each team, and then I can like turn that point differential into a win model or
Okay.
win odds based
Yeah.
on that. So it's based on back testing the model. That's how it converts there. So it does begin with a number, a point differential based on home field stuff like that, and then
Mhm.
it converts that into win odds based on back testing.
Okay. All right. So, let's talk about some of the power ratings here. I thought week 12 was really interesting. And, week 13 is going to be incredibly interesting in that we have the return of Deshaun Watson. And, that's obviously a big move up for the Browns in the power ratings. I've bumped them up a whole 4 points with the move. And honestly, that might be too much. With the move from Jacoby Brissett to Deshaun Watson, especially considering that Watson is not that he just hasn't played any this year, he also didn't play any last year. So there could be significant rust, keeping in mind totally new environment for him, new city, new team, new offensive system, all of that. So, it's not an insignificant assumption that he's 4 points better than Jacoby Brissett, but that's the assumption that I've made here. So obviously the Browns, a massive move up in the power ratings week over week. And then I would also say here the Jets. Their defense is strong. They had a really good win. I mean, it's against, like a second string, quarterback, whatever. But they looked functional in a way that they hadn't looked functional for the past couple of months. And so with Mike White as a functional quarterback, I gave a pretty decent bump to the Jets, not a whole point, but 3/4 of a point for the Jets in the power ratings. What are the teams that have moved up for you recently?
The Browns are the obvious one because
Yeah.
their offense was very efficient with Jacoby Brissett, which was shocking to me. Like I had a pretty low prior on him coming into the year, and it's slow progression of like, oh wow, this is actually happening. So if you have a good infrastructure around Deshaun Watson, that implies that they're probably going to play pretty well. So obviously it's the same thing there. Other one that I thought was noteworthy last week was the Patriots because they were bottom like 3 offense for me before that Vikings game, and they played pretty well there despite not having David Andrews. So I thought that was really encouraging to see that happening because their defense is very good. That's never been a concern. They've been a top 5 defense for the entire year, but to see their offense finally show some life. I know the Vikings aren't like a tremendous defense, but they are a very good rush defense. They're decent against the pass. So to see Mac Jones flashing competency, I thought that was really encouraging and did shift my view of the Patriots a decent amount. Other one is the Panthers, because going from like 31st, where you're an outlier in how bad you are, to being now 29th, it's not like a huge move in terms of like actual movement, but the actual like the rating around them did get a lot better with Sam Darnold being in there. So yeah, it's against Denver. Yeah, Darnold wasn't like amazing or anything, but like being competent on that team is worth quite a bit. So the ones for me that got the biggest boost would be the Browns, the Patriots, and the Panthers.
It's interesting to talk about the Panthers there because this week with the return of Deshaun Watson, and if you put all of your ratings net to 0, and if you're moving the Browns up 4 points, that means you have to move some of the other teams down. And so ordinarily, based on what we saw out of Sam Darnold, I would have bumped the Panthers up. I just didn't bump them
Right.
down this week as a
Right.
way of kind of
So it's a
adjusting.
net
Yeah.
up then relative to
Yeah.
teams that are not the Browns.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So they are intriguing. As a DJ Moore investor, I hope that everything continues to work out with Sam Darnold there. And I mean, their quarterback situation, their coaching situation, it feels like long term a big mess, but maybe they can get something going for the rest of the season here. A team that moved down pretty significant for me, the Bears. And it's not just the Justin Fields situation, although that's certainly a part of it. And I think there's a chance that he misses this week. But there are a number of guys who suffered injuries in this last game. So obviously Darnell Mooney out for the year. Riley Reif, right tackle, he suffered a shoulder injury. Eddie Jackson left the game with a foot injury. Like, not all of these guys are going to be healthy for this week. And even if some of them do return, it's just like this team, they are incentivized to lose and they don't have many good players at this point. So they are a team that I moved pretty significantly down the ratings. I wonder if you have any thoughts on them. And then I also know that you moved the Buccaneers down your rankings quite a bit.
Yeah, the Bears, it was the injuries and like Mike White can be competent, Mike White can be fun. Mike White should not be shredding you in the rain. With like
Yeah.
10-mile-per-hour winds or so, that shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
I know that like Garrett Wilson's a very good football player and stuff like that, but like that shouldn't happen. So I think moving the Bears down, justifiable. I already had like they were already, I think they're now 31st. Like they were already kind of low, so it's hard for me to move them much more down. And they kind of get manually adjusted down because of the performance they gave up. But that was real bad. As far as the Bucks go, I thought that Sunday they were playing in 12-mile-per-hour winds, and that's very noteworthy. That does matter quite a bit, but like I thought that was their worst showing of the year, at least on offense. And I don't know if that's like a hot take, but I thought it was. Because what they've been able to do this year, for the most part, they have still been an efficient team on early downs, specifically through the air. Like their early down passing efficiency for the whole year is pretty good still. They've struggled on late downs. They've been hideous running the ball. Those two things are, that's an issue for sure. But late downs can sometimes kind of be fluky. But the early down passing efficiency was still there. It was not there on Sunday. They were at 0.14 EPA per dropback below expectation in that game against Cleveland on early downs. That was their worst showing since week 3, tied week 3. And it was their second worst showing of the year. Their worst one was against New Orleans in week 2. So just a really bad showing. I was kind of hoping they might show some progress. They had been, I thought, okay at times before their bye. They come out of the bye really not looking good. Now Tristan
Yeah.
Wirfs is banged up. I think you got to bump them down for that as well. So I thought that was arguably their worst showing of the entire year on Sunday.
Yeah, Tampa Bay is one of those teams where I think I'm just too high on them, and some of it is the coaching, right? Like the decision making that they have, both on the offensive side of the ball in terms of, okay, we're going to run on first down, like we're going to do suboptimal things in terms of how we sequence our plays, and then also decision making in terms of when you're going for it on fourth down, when you're calling timeouts, things like that. And I don't think I am downgrading the Buccaneers enough based on those factors, because that's like that stuff is sort of different than looking at EPA or success rate. Like that's something that sometimes isn't caught up in the numbers, and it's hard to account for those things sometimes in models. But I think I can see it. The Buccaneers, like increasingly it seems like this is not the year for them, and somehow just because of the division that they are in,
Yeah,
they're going to end up making the playoffs. And who knows, if things come together right,
sure.
maybe they win a game in the playoffs. But
Right, like I'm downgrading them, but that doesn't mean I'm like writing them off. Like it's still, I grew up a Jets fan. I know what can happen if you write off Tom Brady. I'm not going to do that. So I'm downgrading them, but I'm not writing them off.
Yeah. So I have a process where I have my kind of like situation or like week agnostic power ratings. And then on top of that, I layer in like short-term injury discounts.
Yeah.
And so I still have the Buccaneers at, man, this just feels too high, but I still have them at number 10 in my rankings as 1.5 points better than an average team on a neutral field. That feels a little bit too high to me.
They are exactly 10th for me in my, this is weird for week 13. So it's accounting for Wirfs being out. I have 2 separate models. I got annoyed with how high the charges were in one of mine, so I actually created another model just to make them look worse because they're so annoying. So the model I trust more, which is the anti-Chargers one, has the Bucks in 10th. The traditional one that I have back testing on, I guess I kind of like, I know I have more data on. That one has Tampa Bay 12th. So 10th or 12th, depending on the model, after a bump down for Wirfs. Their defense is a big part of that because they're still very good there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of hard to put them lower than that just because there are a lot of bad teams. I think that's the main issue.
Yeah. I mean, I would be fine if I had, I guess in theory, I don't know, Minnesota maybe ahead of Tampa Bay, Tennessee maybe ahead of Tampa Bay. I think you can make the argument there, and I don't have them there yet. But looking at the teams that I have ahead of Tampa Bay. I'm pretty comfortable with them. And at the
Yeah.
top, you have the Chiefs, you have the Bills, and maybe people will have that flipped, but I have the Chiefs barely ahead of the Bills. And then there's a tier break for me. And I'd like to get your thoughts on some of these teams like after those top two, because you'll have this triumvirate of teams at the top of the NFC in a lot of power ratings. The Cowboys, the 49ers, the Eagles, those are teams 3 through 5 for me, pretty much grouped together. And then after them, I have Cincinnati and Miami. And then Baltimore is not all that far behind Cincinnati and Miami. But how do you think about those two different groups of teams, the top of the NFC, and then I'd say like the second class of the AFC?
So there is one team I'm lower on, which is the Eagles. And I don't agree necessarily with my numbers on this one because I like watching Jalen Hurts. I think that's it. They're a fun team to watch. So I feel weird being lower on them. But if you adjust for the teams they played, their early down passing efficiency is actually below average, which was surprising to me. And that's without a big adjustment down for Dallas Goedert. Like it's a little bit in there,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not a huge adjustment in there. So they're actually seventh for me based on just my numbers. The team I'm higher on is the Ravens. So you alluded to them. And it's very frustrating because they keep playing in wind. I haven't gotten to get like a good read on them yet. They have all
Yeah.
this stupid stuff like Ronnie Stanley missing games. I have a downward adjustment in there for Rashad Bateman being out, and they're still freaking fifth, and it drives me nuts. Like I still bet the Jags this past week, that like it still allowed me to do that, but like they're still fifth, and it's like I want to get them out of there, but I can't make them any lower because they're insanely good in early downs, and that's a big part of the model is
Mm-hmm.
early down efficiency. Their early down rushing efficiency is second best behind Philadelphia. Early down passing efficiency is up there. Late down success rate is a bit lower. That's more middle of the pack, and the defense it's been good, but not great by any means. So I want to get them lower than fifth, but like I don't know. Cincinnati's sixth. I probably would hand rank Cincinnati above Baltimore if I were doing it by hand versus doing it by a model. Miami's below them. I'd probably go Baltimore over Miami if they were to play again because I have a lot more faith in Baltimore's defense than Miami's, despite the way that game went. I'd probably hand rank Philadelphia above them as well. So if I were hand ranking it, I'd probably put Baltimore lower, but I physically can't get them any lower, which is very, very annoying to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have Miami just a quarter of a point
Mhm.
better than Baltimore. I'm curious, and I do have like a slight tier between Dallas and San Francisco, who I have tied basically at number 3 and 4, and Philadelphia at number 5. I have Dallas and San Francisco as 3/4 of a point better than Philadelphia. It sounds like the Cowboys and the 49ers are the top two teams for you in the
Yeah.
NFC. How do you stack them? How do you compare them?
Dallas is one. I feel pretty good about that. Like that defense is sick. They're awesome. They've been awesome all year. I know they're struggling against the rush a little bit, which could be troublesome specifically against either Philly or San Francisco, but like in a vacuum, like I think they're the best team in the NFC because Dak has been just flame throwing since he came back. He's had some bad picks, but like we can kind of have like negative highlight bias in our minds where we remember that awful pick against Green Bay. That's annoying. Couple bad picks again on Thanksgiving, but like the overall body of work, even including the picks, has been unfreaking real. So I'll put Dallas up there, and I do agree with that one pretty confidently, putting Dallas first. San Francisco, they're a hard one for me to like fully grasp because when I look at their numbers post McCaffrey trade, like they're really good. And it's like, do I actually think that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to have a 48% adjusted success rate in late downs? It's kind of like that again, negative highlight bias. This time I'm not accounting for it enough. Like maybe I'm like using my own bias here. I'm like, I don't know if I actually want to like follow that too much. So San Francisco could be higher than they are. They're fourth to me, but I have the same order, except I have the Bills and Chiefs flipped. I kind of disagree with that one too. And then Dallas and then San Francisco. I agree with that ranking. San Francisco could be higher if I were to put, just like fully trust their split with McCaffrey. I don't trust it yet because I don't trust Garoppolo.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe that's just like again negative highlight bias on my part.
Yeah, the Garoppolo thing, and Kevin Cole, I think, is, at PFF, like a Garoppolo apologist, and I feel
Yeah.
like I'm closer to that than not, but I feel dirty about it. It's not like I
Yeah.
think he's great, but he's number 4 in composite EPA and completion percentage over expectation since 2017. Like since joining the 49ers. Like
Yeah.
that's pretty good. And the guys like he's up there with, it's Mahomes and it's Drew Brees and Deshaun Watson, and he's just ahead of Joe Burrow. Like it's, like it's a legit list. And that's not to say that he is in the caliber of those quarterbacks.
Right.
It's just to say that within the confines of the Shanahan system and what he's asked to do in it on a per play basis, he has been historically efficient. It's
Right.
like, that's the way of contextualizing it, but it's not, but you do have to acknowledge the limitations that he has.
Right. And I'm projecting efficiency. So that's all I care about is
Yeah.
what he's done. It's like I should have more faith in it. And they are fourth for me. It's just like I just get weird vibes. And like, can I actually do this? And like I should. And they are up there, but it's like I can't go as aggressive and manually adjusting them as maybe I should, because like there's like that, he could implode at any moment, because I've seen it a
Yeah.
lot.
Right.
But yeah, I think that like if you're talking about the 2017 stat, that was before they had like elite personnel too. So it's not just the elite personnel propping up. That's a big part of the sample. But I think it's important to note that like he was efficient before all this happened too.
Yeah, good observation there. This is, some of this is pre-Debo, pre-Kittle, pre-Ayuk.
Like Marquise Goodwin, I believe, back in the day.
Yeah. Oh man, that's a painful group of wide receivers he had to work with for a little bit. All right, let's talk about some of these week 13 lines, and we're not going to hit on all of them here, but I think it's always an interesting exercise to look at some of these lines, see where they were in the offseason market, even the look ahead market last Thursday, and see, where we've seen movement here. And, one of the games I want to touch on here, I can't help but talk about this just because Denver has been so disappointing in comparison to their preseason expectations. But, Baltimore hosting Denver in the offseason market, this number was around Baltimore favored by 1.5 points. In the look ahead market last Thursday, it was 6.5. And now I'm looking at the odds page here that we have at BettingPros, and this number is 8 at BetMGM. By the way, BetMGM, where you can get the risk-free bet of up to $1,000 with the highly original promo code BettingPros with your first deposit. This number is now 8. And so it has moved significantly. And I mean, I got to be honest, I don't know if it's moved far enough given how bad Denver is. The thing is, they do have that defense, one of the best defenses in the league, but their offense, if it's not the worst offense in the league, it's certainly bottom 3. And I think there's room for it to get worse. I mean, there's always room for it to get better in theory, but there's also room for it to get worse. So what do you make of this line movement that we've seen so far, with this number getting all the way to 8?
Justified? I think that's the word that I would use, because like, we're getting reaction to what we saw this past weekend. Obviously Baltimore didn't play great, but like Denver they opened as favorites against Carolina. That number shortened. I think they closed at -116 on the money line against Carolina. And then they lost in pretty spectacular fashion. So if we don't assume that Jerry Jeudy is back this week, like how are they moving the ball against a Baltimore defense that I think is pretty good? So I would say that it's justified where it's currently at right now. With that said, like my numbers do say that like it should be a bit shorter than this. My one model has a 6.12. The other one has Denver being underdogs by a little bit less, a little bit more than that. So it says it's probably a little bit hefty, but with that said, I'm not betting it. I think that it's justified. Bad vibes. I bet too much on the Cardinals early on this year, and a couple of times on the Broncos. I can't handle any more bad vibes. I bet on the Jets against the Patriots, that punt return touchdown. So bad vibes. I can't do it anymore.
Yeah, you asked the question, how do they move the ball? Latavius Murray, the 40-year-old body of Latavius Murray,
Revenge
and a
game.
hashtag revenge game.
Yeah.
Exactly. Revenge game against the Ravens. That's how they look to move the ball. You mentioned the Jets, and we talked about them earlier as a team that I've moved up the rankings here. If you look at this game against Minnesota, 5.5 was the line in the offseason look ahead market. It was 3.5. And then 3.5 on the look ahead last Thursday. 4. It's moved around a little bit here. I mean, this could get closer to 3 here. Talk to me about the Jets here, and I think you're on the money line.
I am. So I took the Jets when they were plus 140. It's plus 134 now. The reason I did so, and it's you mentioned bumping them up for Mike White. I didn't, because he's still like, a guy who was a third stringer coming in the year. But my numbers were so high in the Jets to begin with, and like I didn't need to bump them to be on them at this number.
Mm-hmm.
So I have, again, 2 separate models. One of them, I don't know. One of them hasn't favored in this game. I don't know if I agree with that. That might be a little bit ambitious. But the other one has the Vikings by 1.23 points. With the money line being plus 134. I'm okay buying into the Jets based on what that model is saying and ignoring the more aggressive model, while knowing the more aggressive model is like, actually, there's even more value here. So I bet the Jets based on the model that's more conservative with them, knowing that the more aggressive one said that is even better value. Because again, like their early down efficiency, like once you adjust for opponent, actually wasn't that bad when Zach Wilson got benched. I know it's like weird to say, and like at the eye test, it's like, I don't know about that. But like they just imploded on late downs. And I try to, account for the flukiness, the spikes that can come with that kind of thing. And so like they were actually pretty good to begin with. So I didn't bump them up. They were already values for me. So I did take the money line plus 134. We'll see if I regret putting money on Mike White to win a football game against a team that's, whatever, 10 and 9-2 or whatever they are. But I think that's the right way to go here.
Yeah. So I'm going to see if I can remember this correctly. And I'm going to say the way I am talking about this, it's probably a little bit incorrect, but the Patriots, I believed against the Jets, 2 games against the Jets this year, they closed as 3-point favorites in both games, won both games, covered both games. And then last week, Thanksgiving, against the Vikings, they were, what was the number? Was that
2.5?
2.5?
Closed, I believe.
Yeah, it closed at 2.5. And so the number of 3 right now, I mean, I know it's on the key number, but not all that far from the 2.5 that we saw last week. It feels a little bit short to me.
Yeah, I can understand that for sure. I think that part of it, though, is I thought that New England was overvalued in both those games. Obviously, the Jets didn't cover in either, so maybe I was wrong in that. But I did think the Patriots were a bit overvalued in that game, in both those games. And I actually bet the Jets in both those didn't go well. Here we are, and I'm betting the Jets again, so maybe it won't go well again. But I thought that they were overvalued in both those, and so as a result, I guess I didn't care too much about the transitive property of those. The Jets closed at plus 134 in the money line for the week 8 game. They were plus 154 at home in week 11. So yeah, they actually got worse despite being at home for the second one, which is not ideal. But yeah, I think that those numbers, even though they didn't work, and the one emphatically didn't work, the first game, I still feel like the Patriots might have been a bit overvalued in those 2 games.
Yeah, that's possible. And I mean, again, the addition of Mike White, like,
yeah, maybe.
It's it's a different team. In theory, it's a different team. Yeah, hopefully. All right, one game I have to look at is this Rams game. I mean, my goodness, this number was 10 in the opposite direction. The Rams at home in the offseason market were favored by 10 points. In the look ahead market, this was 3. It was 4.5 when the early lines were released on Sunday, and as of recording, it has gone all the way up to 8. I mean, my goodness. By the way, I bet this early on Monday at -4.5, and I logged it in the BettingPros app, which now gives me the opportunity to remind you that in the BettingPros app, you can sync up with sportsbooks, you can get free betting advice and picks, you can track different experts, track line movement, track your own bets, and you can get sports betting alerts. And we monitor all the major sports books so you can see which book is offering the best line on a bet at any given moment. So download the app today in the Apple or Google Play Store. I mean, the Rams, what do you make of the descent into hell that we have seen for this organization?
It's been exactly that. And now you take Aaron Donald out. It's like, okay, if I assume he misses this week with that ankle injury, like how much is that? How much is that worth? Probably a lot, honestly. Like, it's not worth the 3 points it's moved since Monday, but you're kind of just stacking stuff. And I think the idea of cluster injuries is key because
Yeah.
there's no Matthew Stafford, potentially no John Wolford again. There's no Cooper Kupp, Allen Robinson, if that matters. I don't know. The entire offensive line is gone. So you kind of get like this like cascade effect of this avalanche effect of like, okay, you take out every most impactful piece except for Jalen Ramsey. How do you fully account for that? And that's why I haven't taken that despite my numbers being closer to where the look ahead was, or the 4.5 number was. I don't know. I feel like it's more likely that I am undervaluing the value of those guys than I'm overvaluing it. So that's why I'm skewing towards, despite showing value, not betting it because I disagree. I feel like I'm probably under accounting for this stuff, and it is a manual adjustment, so I could adjust more. But it's like I don't know if I can actually project them to be worse passing physically. So I'm showing value on the Rams side. I refuse to bet it. I will not bet it unless it gets to something crazy. It's come back 7.5. So that tells me we're probably going to be steadying out around there. But I just like when you cluster so many impactful injuries together, it's hard to grasp how much value that may be worth.
Yeah, I mean, when your defense is the best part of your team because your offense is just absolutely dead, and your defense is anchored, by two guys in a stars and scrubs approach, and
Yeah.
one of your stars is gone.
Right.
It's not very good. All right, one game that I know you're looking on and you're betting on, the Chargers money line going against the Raiders. By the way, speaking of the Raiders, going to do another plug here. We are giving away a free signed Josh Jacobs Raiders jersey from Pristine Auction. Josh Jacobs, absolute monster. Regret of my fantasy preseason and being like, hey, Josh Jacobs, not so sure about that guy. Anyway, if you want a chance to win this free signed Josh Jacobs jersey, subscribe to the Betting Pros YouTube channel right now and comment below on the video. We will announce a winner on the channel in a future episode, so turn on your notifications. The money line here for you, the Chargers, this was 135, minus 135. It has moved to minus 126. Talk to me about what you were seeing here with the Chargers against the Raiders.
Yeah, so I'm not betting this one yet. I'm
Okay.
more marking it as one to monitor because the vibes around the Raiders are very good. And you can sometimes, like, you shouldn't use vibes to bet, but you can use vibes to try to predict where a market will go. So this has already gone from minus 135 for the Chargers now to minus 126. It's held steady at minus 126 for a while now. And maybe that means that it sticks there and doesn't move. If it were to move more, I could see myself buying into the Chargers. And again, I specifically built a model to get myself to stop betting this stupid team. So like, I don't want to bet them, and I'm trying not to. But if it were to move more, I could see there being value here. The model I built to downgrade this stupid team has them favored by 1.55. Now, that's not going to get me to show value at minus 126. But if that minus 126 were to come down, I could have some interest there. So I want to keep tabs on that one. We haven't seen a ton of big moves this year, but we've seen some moves like the Washington-Chicago Thursday night game. We saw a pretty big move there. There was a game where Tom Brady was like an underdog, and then eventually they closed as favorites there. There have been some games this year where we've seen significant moves around zero. And I wouldn't be shocked if this is one just because, people talk themselves into Josh Jacobs against the Chargers, justifiably so. That's actually a legit concern. I could see this one moving to where the Raiders, maybe they go from plus 108 to minus 108. It's minus 108 both sides, something like that. If that gets there, I'll probably buy into the Chargers. I'm not there now, but I do think that it's worth monitoring to see if it gets there, given the sentiment and given the way things have moved in recently.
All right. One more game here to talk about. Thursday night football. We have the Bills on the road at the Patriots. The Bills, looking at it now, this number was 5.5. It has moved down to 4.5. And let me see, was in the look ahead market, it was 45.5, where I took the under there because that just, on its face, that just fell too high. And it has moved down to 43.5 now. I don't know if you have any opinions on these two teams, kind of big picture in general, and what we might see out of this divisional matchup. But how are you viewing this game?
Yeah, so I'm probably going to wind up taking the Bills eventually. I'm not yet because we saw it move to 4.5. It's minus 115 on 4.5 right now. If it stays minus 115, implying that we're not going to get it at, get it down to minus 110 or something like that, I'll probably wind up taking that. I have not yet. I have the Bills favored by 6.5 in this game because, again, like I said, they are still tops in my power rankings because the defense is very good. And that kind of negates the key advantage that New England has typically, is that their defense is so good. Obviously, the Bills' defense has not been as good recently because of the injuries they've had and stuff like that. But they are getting some guys back, like Poyer's back and stuff like that. So they're slowly getting it a little bit healthier. This offense is much better than New England's. So I'm probably going to get to 4.5. I just want to see if we can get it at not minus 115. So I want to keep an eye on that market. I'm going to bet the Bills, I'm pretty sure, at some point. I just haven't gotten there yet because I want to see if the market continues to go in the Patriots' favor. I think the Bills are undervalued here, and I probably will get there. Just want to see if I can get a better number before I actually do dive in.
Yeah, to your point about this team getting healthier, a number of players who sat out the Thanksgiving game.
Mitch Morse, their center, was one too. He was full on Monday, and that was part of the reason why I was on the Lions, was his likely being out and eventually being out. I think that's a pretty big because like left tackle is important. Center is like a force multiplier for the entire offensive line. So having him out on a below average offensive line, that did matter a lot to me. So getting him back matters a lot too.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, back-to-back full practices for a number of guys who are out on Thanksgiving, including center Mitch Morse, but then also off-ball linebacker Tremaine Edmonds, and then two edge rushers, AJ Epinesa and Greg Rousseau. Both of those guys out before, looks like almost certain that they will be returning this game. One thing I will want to keep an eye on is Deion Dawkins, who has missed back-to-back practices with an ankle injury. That wasn't one that I was really cognizant of entering the week. I'm imagining he's going to be fine. I haven't really seen anything saying there's a real chance he's going to miss this game, but he's someone I'm going to want to keep an eye on.
Yeah, he did leave early on Thanksgiving.
Okay.
I'm not sure. You can sometimes see guys sit and be okay, and especially an ankle thing, it hasn't seemed like it's been too bad. So I'm also assuming that he does wind up playing, but he didn't come back in that game. So I wouldn't be shocked if he sat, and that would be a downgrade for them. Maybe that keeps me off of taking the 4.5, but I'm kind of on your side there. I'm assuming he does still wind up playing.
Yeah, so I have this in terms of the projections. I have this at 4.75. So, in theory, I'm basically just kind of right where the market is, not seeing any value on the side there. And for the total, let me see, the number is now 43.5. I have it projected at 42.7. So, maybe a little bit of value on the under here, but this is probably a game, I think, more for watching than necessarily for betting at this point in the market cycle. All right, Jim, awesome to have you on the show. Really enjoyed the conversation. Tell the people where to follow you on social and where to find your work.
Yeah, so we have a daily betting show called Covering the Spread. Talking a lot of football there, talking World Cup, talking college football for the conference championships. That goes up every weekday. Just search for Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. Our DFS shows are under the Number Fire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed, and then all my other work is up at Number Fire, and I'm on Twitter at Jim Sonis.
All right, so Jim, you talked about college football, looking at the conference championships. I don't know if you can see. I'll scooch down a little bit right there. I've got the
TCU. Love it.
The Horned Frog bobblehead. Talk to me about TCU. Do they cover? It's not a question if they win, because they're winning this game. Do they cover this game?
So I don't have my own college football number. I ask questions. I play point guard on the college football one because I don't have my own numbers. I don't root for a good college team, so I've never built numbers there. I'm gonna say sure, because it seems like TCU has always been undervalued. Like we've always been saying, okay, like, you know, Baylor's gonna topple them, and they covered. Baylor covered, so that's something for sure. But then like they kicked the heck out of Iowa State last night, or last week. So I'll say they cover, just for funsies. I like a purple team too, so gotta ride at the purple. That is the most in-depth analysis I can give of college football. Again, I ask questions on that one, unfortunately.
What's your purple team?
Northwestern, 1-11 Go Cats. You know, I was in Ireland for their win, so I got to, you know, after that win, I was like, okay, cool. They can lose every other game this year. I'll be happy. I didn't think they would actually test that theory, and they did. But it was still, you know, I just got to not invest in them this year, which is very helpful.
At least you got that one win.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Jim, awesome. Thanks for being on the show. That is Jim Sonis. I'm Matthew Freedman, Matt Effie Oracle. Check out BettingPros and Fantasy Pros for all of my work. Best bets, player props, fantasy favorites, player projections and rankings, and more. That's going to do it for this week 13 market movement and power ratings edition of the Betting Pros pod. If you like the show, please rate and review on your favorite podcast app. Thanks for tuning in. Good luck, and see you next episode.